Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. My name is Abby Branker, and I am sitting here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
And today we are talking about the intersection of winter and horror.
Not to be confused with holiday horror, which happens during the winter often.
Certainly. This is about snow, it's about ice, it's about being freezing cold, avalanches, hypothermia, survival, snow mythology and folklore. It's about all of those things.
And the lesser known, snow poisoning.
And snow poisoning. This is going to be a 4-part series. Today we're going to start by covering ancient mythology and folklore. We're also going to cover real-life snow tragedies, isolation, monsters, and of course how all of these influenced horror in its many forms. In this series, we're going to talk about everything from the scariest winter horror films ever made to mythology, folklore, and real-life tragedies from different cultures around the globe.
And some winter horror movies that may not be the scariest movie ever made, but they're still pretty fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or they're really dumb and I still watched them.
Alan's been watching a lot of movies.
I have. That's
as
been
always.
Fun. This is a great topic to do now, because it lines up with the seasons, and I have lots of time to watch movies. Because just like the temperature outside, my career is very frozen during this type of year. There's not much happening in the film industry.
There's some seasonality to your busy schedule.
A bit of hibernation, if you will.
Yeah, which is great. An interesting thing just happened because before this, we were recording this new Patreon project that we're starting, which is sending out quarterly tarot mailers for folks who participate. So it's essentially, I pull a card for each person. I do a video about what the card means, but there's this larger theme. And there's actually this newspaper that I've made that kind of, has articles and poems and stories and all these different things from different sources on that theme. The theme is winter for this first one. And it's so fascinating because I bought this deck of cards, winter-themed tarot cards, to kick this off and to send to everybody. And through the research of today's episode, I had found some of these new deities and goddesses and gods of different cultures. And some of those were actually referenced in that deck, which I had never, ever heard of before researching this episode. So it was one of those little small world moments for me today where I was like, wow, all of these themes are colliding. But let's get into our sources today. We have a Smithsonian Magazine article by Dennis Zottig. The winter solstice begins a season of storytelling and ceremony. A Mythopedia article by Gregory Wright on Calic. An article by Elizabeth Fabelwhale from oldfolklore.com. The blizzard spirit of the Inuit. The Iroquois and the legends of the first snowfall. An article from Native American mythology worldwide. And I used Wikipedia quite a bit because here's the thing about researching some of these mythologies and kind of bits of folklore. There's often not academic sources on them, or there can be, and they're really dense textbooks and things like that I don't have direct access to. There's a lot of blog coverage, and so a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is kind of blog coverage cross-checked with Wikipedia, things like that. So just acknowledging, right, that I'm not a historian or an expert in all these cultures, but we're going to do our best to kind of represent what we have unearthed through research.
As a macro, what's your favorite thing you've learned while doing this research?
The thing that I found most interesting is that there's a lot of deities across different cultures that personify winter and explain parts of the season or even the landscape. And so, this is happening and that's why it's snowing. Also kind of this overarching theme of winter being necessary to protect the earth and let the earth rebuild for spring. So sometimes winter is obviously a harsh season, especially for early humans, and ancient humans that didn't have the luxuries of heating and electricity and cars and things like that. So some of it certainly is, okay, there's fear in winter and there's this cruelty of winter. But a lot of it was kind of positive or neutral, and it seems like that's kind of because there was this rebirth that they thought was happening, and that without this blanket protection of snow, the earth wouldn't be fertile in spring. It was a necessary step, which I thought was kind of, I don't know, it was new information to me.
No, you're definitely onto something. So if you want to get all zen about it,
Sure.
Years ago, when I first got into bonsai, my whole first batch of trees died. because I was growing them indoors. I had grow lamps, I was doing all these things. And it wasn't until I was it wasn't until I basically lost most of my trees, all but one, that I learned that most trees need to winter. It's a key part in the growth cycle. When nutrients are abundant, it gets lots of sun, the temperature is nice, it grows. It tries to do as much as it can. But then when the winter comes, the tree freezes and, it retracts all its nutrients deep into itself, and it uses this as a time to basically muster its forces, to get all its nutrients ready to go for the next growth cycle. And so I didn't really understand why that was going to be necessary. It seems like without winter, great, it can just grow all the time. But then it's just like a person, it burns out. It just stretches itself too thin. It tries to grow too much. It doesn't take the time to really center itself, and then the tree dies. Unless you have a tropical tree, which is climatized to growing year round. But I just thought that was kind of like a beautiful thing where you look at winter as being something that needs to be survived. But instead, this is something that is necessary to survival.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Aren't there some tortoises that need to be like put in the refrigerator? Like literally, like some people who own tortoises they put them in the refrigerator for a month or something I think it's a similar sort of thing.
That's sounding really familiar. I don't know the details off the top of my head, but I've seen reptiles where, they put them in refrigerators. Yeah. Or I don't know if it's refrigerator. There's got to be some kind of airflow. Because I don't know.
I think they are in refrigerators, like in Tupperware.
But like bears, when they hibernate for the winter, they still have bodily functions and they still do things. They're just kind of like sleeping with a very slow metabolism. And then they walk out of the end in the spring and they're all like the skinny polar bear, which is kind of cute. But no, I've seen the images of the turtles in Tupperware. I want to learn more about that.
Tune in next time. Dating back thousands of years, people used to
have to put their turtles into stone Tupperware.
Dating back thousands of years, people used to explain the world through story. Mythology is humanity's earliest attempt to explain existence and the natural world around us. It is a system of stories used to identify where the world came from, why nature behaves the way it does, and what happens when we die. This is something we've talked about a lot on this podcast, but maybe not recently. It's been a little bit since we've had a nice, meaty mythology topic. But something I love so much about ancient mythology and folklore is that to me, it's a time capsule of people at the time when these stories originated and how they were trying to explain the world before there was this understanding of science. Long before lightning could be measured or snow patterns understood, let alone predicted on the Weather Channel, these forces felt alive. The wind had intention, storms had moods, and sometimes they were brought by people or gods or deities. Winter did not simply arrive, it was sent. We're starting this series off with an episode on folklore and mythology because it will help set the foundation for the rest of this series. So much of this folklore is dark and spooky, but not all of it. For example, we're going to talk a bit about Native American mythology and creation myths. Deities and gods emerged as a way to give shape to the unknown. When a society could not control famine, for instance, weather, disease, or death, belief sort of became this survival tool. It became a way to rationalize what was going on and the cruelty of what was going around around people. It was believed that gods turned chaos into a narrative, right? If something had a name and a personality, it could be feared, respected, bargained with, or appeased. And you would get sacrifices and you would get rituals and traditions in honor of these gods as a way to try to keep them at bay or keep them behaved, right? These beliefs were not naive in the way that sometimes we might imagine today, right? So we might be like, oh man, those folks didn't understand science, and so they were so naive and they made up these stories. But they were practical. If winter killed crops, then winter must have a will. If the sea swallowed ships, then the sea must have a temper. Appeasing a god meant creating order in a dangerous world, even if that order was symbolic. Myths also serve as moral instruction. There's a lot of these myths we're going to talk about today that have kind of clear allegories and messages, and they're meant to maybe dissuade people from doing things that were dangerous, etc. They taught communities how to behave, what to value, and what to fear. Stories of divine punishment reinforced social rules. Stories of favor rewarded obedience, bravery, or sacrifice. In this way, gods were not distant beings, but active participants in everyday life. But most importantly, mythology helped people cope with powerlessness. When survival depended on forces far beyond human control, belief offered meaning. A harsh winter was not random cruelty, it was a trial, a punishment, a test. Or the work of a god whose presence could be felt in the snow itself. Even as societies changed, these stories still endured. They evolved into folklore, superstition, religion, and eventually horror. Because while science may explain the mechanics of the world, mythology explains how it felt to live in it. And nowhere is that feeling more vivid than in the stories of winter. In 1952, a film called The White Reindeer was released. It's a Finnish folk horror movie, the first film by Eric Bloomberg. It tells the story of a woman who is cursed through a shamanic ritual based on Finnish Lapland folklore. Winter is a character in this movie. Some critics point to this as one of the earliest movies that really treats winter as a supernatural force. Another movie with similar traits is November from 2017. This is a movie based on Estonian folklore. What's really cool about this movie is that it portrays folklore as part of daily life, which is kind of like the point I was just trying to make, right? Not something bigger or fantastical. We're going to talk about November in a few episodes in this series for different reasons, so I wanted to mention it at the beginning.
This is crazy. Why am I watching movies about like kids stuck on chairlifts?
That's coming.
And you have all these like real ringers that you're not sharing.
But those are coming. It's a great example of folklore surviving into modern art. Deities that personify seasons span many cultures. One of the most interesting that I found is Cailleach, a divine hag from Gaelic mythology. She is associated with the arrival of winter and the creation of the landscape across Scotland, the Isle of Man, and Ireland, the three Gaelic-speaking regions. She rules over the cold and the wind. She's connected to the inhospitable regions of landscape and the cruelty of harsh and wild winter weather. She is also sometimes known as the Hag of Beria, the Queen of Winter, or the Veiled One. In Scotland, she is believed to have created mountains. The legend says that as she was traveling across the countryside, several large rocks fell from her wicker basket and made mountains. As she traveled, she also made mountains purposefully when she needed stepping stones. She used a special hammer to shape the landscape. She could also use her hammer to create storms and thunder. In some traditions, she also controlled a special well that would sometimes overflow and flood the countryside. She was a goddess of grain, which was important to survival for the people that believed in her. The last grain harvested for the season was often dedicated to her. When you were a kid, Alan, did your family ever say that thunder were the gods bowling?
No.
Oh, my family said that. It reminds me of this. Some thought of her as a giantess cyclops with white hair, rust-colored teeth, and dark blue skin. But other depictions visualize her with two eyes and more traditionally human features. Sometimes her clothing is adorned with skulls. But again, she is this personification of winter, and so she is known to use her staff to freeze the ground, fight off spring, and herd deer.
When you say fight off spring, is spring a deity also they fight?
Yes, exactly. So to answer your question, she, Cailleach, rules between Samhain and Beltane, and Brigid, another pre-Christian goddess from Ireland, rules between Beltane and Samhain, right? So it's kind of the opposite. They're two kind of heads of the same coin, if you will.
What's Beltane?
Beltane is like May the 1st. It's like May Day festivals.
Nothing to do with Belschnickel.
No, Beltane is fantastic because there's these huge bonfires in Scotland. It's like this really fun spring festival. On the Isle of Man, it was believed that during Beltane, Cailleach would actually transform into Brigid, like they were one of the same deity, and she would sort of transform between the two depending on the season. In the Manx, which is the Isle of Man mythology, she was thought to be a shapeshifter that could shift into a giant bird. The interesting thing about Cailleach is that she wasn't inherently good or bad. More so, she was seen as wild and destructive, similar to the harsh winter weather itself. She acted as a representative for nature. She cared very deeply for animals. And in some traditions, she was even the patron of wolves. This idea of winter as an impartial but punishing force shows up constantly in horror. You see versions of figures like her in films like The Witch from 2015, where the wilderness acts as kind of this judge of morality, or The Black Coat's Daughter, also from 2015, where isolation and cold become extensions of kind of this spiritual punishment. The Witch is a really interesting example here, too, because it mimics the wild and unruly foundation that we see in Cailleach, right? The fear and dependence on nature, and that you just need to bend, right, to the rules of the natural world. In the Manx version of the mythology, she spends half of the year as an old crone and half as a young woman, taking a potion halfway through that would restore her youth. A really important tradition tied to Cailleach is collecting wood. I'm quoting here from the mythopedia.com article, quote, "On Imbolc, or February 1st of each year, the Cailleach runs out of firewood for the winter. In the Manx tradition, she transforms into a giant bird and collects firewood in her beak. In Ireland and Scotland, meanwhile, she collects firewood as an old woman. If she wishes for winter to last longer, she makes the day sunny and bright for her search. If she accidentally oversleeps, the day is stormy and gray. Thus, tradition holds that if February 1st it is gray and wintry, winter will be shorter that year. If the day is bright, winter will return due to her preparation. In the United States, this tradition was transformed into Groundhog Day, removing the Cailleach while retaining the central ritual," end quote. And while Cailleach isn't represented broadly in a ton of pop culture, she did inspire the blue skin and general vibe of the brewer hag in Dungeons and Dragons. Amaterasu is a deity from Japanese mythology, believed to have ruled over the heavens until her brother challenged her to become a new ruler. Now, there are many variants, and that is one of them. But let's talk about one origin story here. The brother won this challenge, and Amaterasu hid away in a cave, and with her in hiding, winter came to the land. It took a lot to get her out of the cave. 80 other deities tried to lure her out with a party, but she only came out and reset the balance of the seasons when she was given a mirror and a visit from her daughter. She was lured out by Ame no Uzume. Other variants say that she hides away because of her brother's destructive behavior, not because of a direct challenge from him. Stories like this, where winter arrives because balance is broken, later evolve into horror narratives where environments turn hostile when something goes wrong. Films often borrow this idea, treating snow and cold not as random weather, but as consequence. Yuki Onna, or Snow Woman, is another figure associated with winter from Japan. There are many tales of these women. Sometimes they are described as beautiful, and other times as old hags or crones, similar in some ways to Cailleach, right? And how sometimes she is seen as young and beautiful, and sometimes as an old crone. In some regional traditions, the Yuki Onna are believed to appear at the door during a blizzard and lure men out of them. It kind of reminds me of a siren.
Except they do house calls.
Except they do house calls, exactly. One of the most direct adaptations of this folklore appears in the 1964 film Kwaidan. In this film, Yuki Onna is portrayed as both beautiful and deadly and lethal. The balance of elegance and danger becomes kind of a recurring blueprint for winter spirits in horror cinema. But the Yuki Onna were known to avoid baths. And finally, if they did bathe, they would melt away and only leave icicles in their place. And that's a regional variant.
That's gross.
Other tales describe her as icy cold, a woman who could change into snow and escape through the chimney. Even further variations describe her as standing alongside a road or outside at night in the snow. I think this one is the scariest, holding a child and asking them for help to keep warm. It's said that she might ask the passerby to hold the child, and the baby would become heavier and heavier as snow piles onto you and you slowly freeze to death overnight.
Why would you just stand there?
You're kind of stuck, I think.
Too heavy?
Yeah, like pretty quickly you become slowly trapped in the snow.
That's very sneaky.
Mm-hmm. I think that's her specialty. Unlike some of these other snow deities that are more representations of winter, she's
just mean.
She's mean.
Why?
Yeah. It's like she's like a siren, but she's a snow siren.
But what does she want?
To kill men.
To kill men.
It seems. There's a movie called The Snow Woman from 1968, which is a Japanese horror movie directed by Takuzo Tanaka. The exterior scenes of this movie were purposefully shot in studio instead of outside on location to give an unnatural, otherworldly feel to the movie. Old Man Winter isn't from a single myth or culture. He emerged from European and North American folklore as a personification of winter, shaped by centuries of storytelling rather than one origin story. And that's true for all folklore, right? There's no one origin story. He draws heavily from Germanic and Slavic traditions that imagined winter as an aged male figure, like Morozko or Father Frost, and from medieval European art and poetry that depicted the seasons as human characters.
Old Man Winter is different from Father Frost.
Excellent question, Alan. Yes, Jack Frost and Old Man Winter are two different beings. They're parallel beings, but they are slightly different. Over time, this image traveled into Anglo-American folklore, where Old Man Winter became a familiar name for winter's cold, hardship, and authority, rather than a specific god. In modern horror and genre films, that authority often turns antagonistic. Movies like Rare Exports reinterpret winter folklore as something buried and dangerous. And even disaster films like The Day After Tomorrow treat the cold as this unstoppable, almost sentient force, right?
I mean, Day After Tomorrow was very much done by human meddling. They talk about how we've fucked up the ocean currents by melting the glaciers and created the superstorm.
Right, but that's exactly one of these main themes of winter folklore horror, which is like winter as punishment, winter as morality, winter as values.
You fuck up the global currents, and then they give you a baby that gets too heavy.
That's right, exactly. And then you disappear into icicles.
Gross.
Jack Frost is similar to Old Man Winter, and he's also the personification of all winter weather. He is actually a variant or a parallel figure to Old Man Winter. Jack Frost is traditionally believed to be responsible for the delicate fern-like frost patterns that once commonly appeared on window panes during cold winter mornings. Think, you know that scene in Fantasia where there's like the little fairies that are flittering across the water and leaving the little patterns?
Yes.
That's Jack Frost.
That's
vibes.
what Jack Frost does?
Yeah, exactly.
He dances?
He leaves those little patterns, those little frost patterns, as well as for the biting cold on fingers, toes, and noses. He's like a little nippy.
Yeah, he nips at your toes.
Yeah, exactly.
I know all about that.
Stories of Jack Frost are thought to trace back to Anglo-Saxon and Norse winter traditions. In Finnish folklore, a comparable figure known as Pakasuko appears prominently, even lending his name in a chapter of Finland's national epic drawn from ancient oral traditions. Swedish folklore features a similar character called Kung Bor, or King Bor, a name linked to the 17th century Swedish writer Olaus Rudbeck. In Russia, Jack Frost's counterpart is Grandfather Frost.
Wait, so not to be confused with Old Man Winter or Father Frost. Is there a woman involved? Sorry, that's none of my business.
Morozuku, or Father Frost, is a Russian fairy tale dating back to the mid-1800s. It has a similar framework to Cinderella.
A lot of mice.
And tells the story of a woman who has a daughter that she loves and a stepdaughter that she loathes.
Yeah, she sucks.
We unearthed last night that you have never seen Cinderella.
Oh, it's stupid.
That is mind-blowing to me. It's a classic.
But first off,
it's a classic fairy tale.
Why on earth would you ever have glass footwear? That is so dangerous. And people are trying to
it's a delicacy.
They're trying to shove their foot into a... What if you crack it?
Well, that's what happens. That's the plot.
What, she breaks the slipper? No.
Yes.
What do you mean?
You've never seen it. You don't know what happens.
I know the story. It falls off. I've read the Grimm version. It falls off, and then he goes around with the glass slipper to try to find whose foot it fits.
Yeah, but then the evil stepmother breaks it so that he can't realize that it's her.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah. All right.
Why would she do that?
Because she hates Cinderella. All right, let's talk about Russian folklore. So remember, right, there's a woman similar to Cinderella.
There is a woman involved.
There is a woman similar to Cinderella who has a daughter that she loves and a stepdaughter that she hates, right?
Yep.
The woman orders her husband to take this loathsome stepdaughter out into the winter weather and leave her to die. The husband horrifyingly agrees, because that's his real daughter. He leaves her at the base of a tree in the woods. She's discovered by Father Frost, and she's kind and polite to Father Frost because she's a good girl. And so in return, he gives her a chest of jewels and clothing.
Like her chest is made of jewels now?
No, like a chest, treasure chest of jewels.
A box of jewels.
He doesn't make her bionic, yeah.
Is it bionic if it's crystalline?
I don't know, but I don't know the other word. Later, the evil stepmother then sends the husband to fetch the dead body for burial. But instead, he brings back the little girl alive and dressed in fine clothing and wearing beautiful jewelry, which makes the stepmother very angry and envious. And so she orders her husband to bring her biological daughter out to the same tree. But the girl is rude and mean to Father Frost. When the dad returns, he finds her dead body.
Her dead body.
So again, this is Winter and Father Frost as morality, as an allegory about manners and politeness and kindness.
Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick. What's really what it all comes down to.
Unless you're Japanese, in which case that's your nature.
Why?
Because you're trying to do that so then you can lure men.
Well, she's not being a dick.
She's
being a seductress.
She gives people babies that are heavy. That's mean.
Well, sometimes babies are heavy.
Yeah, but a baby that gets even heavier, and I guess that's all babies technically.
That's how babies grow up, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. It still seems mean. Or just to leave icicles in the bath.
I understand. She's more mean-spirited.
Yeah, fuck off.
Leaving icicles in the bath is her greatest sin.
That's disgusting.
Frau Holly is from German folklore associated with winter, weather, and again, moral order. She is best known for causing snow to fall when she shakes out her feather bed.
Sorry, are we still in Russia?
Now we're in Germany.
We're in Germany.
She appears in the Brothers Grimm tale as both a rewarder and a punisher, blessing the diligent with gold while covering the lazy in pitch. Neither purely benevolent or cruel. Frau Holly represents the belief that the natural world responds to human behavior, making winter itself a force that observes, judges, and often remembers. This moral structure carries directly into modern horror. Films and stories like Hansel and Gretel and The Lodge echo Frau Holly's legacy by framing winter as a test of character, while survival depends not just on strength, but on behavior. There is also a movie called The Juniper Tree from 1990, which plays with Icelandic folklore, and it stars Bjork.
So I got the image of Hansel and Grendel, of the three Hansen brothers and this giant troll thing.
Hansel and Gretel.
I know, but it's kind of funny.
You know,
That's a Beowulf reference.
Hansen were my fave band growing up, and now they've turned kind of dark.
They've turned dark? They're still around? I mean, I know they're not dead. I mean, I actually didn't know.
They're on social media.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah. The Juniper Tree, starring Bjork, is a dark, haunting film based on the Brothers Grimm fairy tale. It tells the story of two sisters, Margit and Katla, living in a remote Icelandic village. When Katla marries a widower with a young son, her jealousy and cruelty set off a chain of tragic events, including the boy's murder. From there, the story unfolds with supernatural revenge. And so it's kind of like this, which is what we're talking about today, but this mix of horror and folklore through the lens of this morality that we see in almost all of these, except Japan.
Right.
Frau Holly is also closely linked to the Germanic figure Perkta.
Perkta.
She is said to live at the bottom of a well, travel in a wagon, and to have taught humans how to produce linen from flax. Scholar Erica Tim suggests that Perkta developed from a blending of Germanic and pre-Germanic traditions in the Alpine regions following the migration period of the early Middle Ages.
She seems really helpful.
Yeah, she is.
She has no problem with living in seemingly undesirable housing. She gets around in a pretty sustainable form of transportation. Mm-hmm. And she makes stuff out of what?
Flax.
Yeah. She teaches crafts.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Well, get a load of this. So there's a 16th century fable that describes a, quote, army of women armed with sickles and sent by Frau Holda. So Frau Holda, Perkta, Frau Holly, they're all kind of these similar figures. Martin Luther also referenced Holda in 1522, portraying her as a grotesque embodiment of rebellious natures, opposing God, using her image symbolically in his theological critiques. Jacob Grimm developed his interpretation of Holda based on what he believed were her earliest references, including an 11th century addition to the canon Episcopi, which he cautiously associated with the same deity. Early scholars questioned whether Holda could truly be considered a pagan goddess, as her earliest clear appearances connect her with the Virgin Mary, often referred to as the Queen of Heaven. During the 15th century, a pagan version of Hulda appeared widely in lists of superstitions and in sermons. Martin Luther continued to invoke her image, using it to personify what he viewed as the failings of antagonistic human reason in theological debate. There are a handful of winter horror movies that play with themes of female winter spirits and morality. Hagazusa from 2017, which was inspired by Alpine paganism. A lot of this movie is about isolation, which we're going to cover in another episode, but it also draws from Pectra and Holly traditions. Serentucci from 2010 was inspired by Swiss Alpine folklore, and all of these films that I'm talking about are not English films. They are films from these countries. And a lot of them actually are nominated to be Best Foreign Film. Like they're put forward and then not picked to be nominated, if that makes sense.
They're not picked to be nominated?
Right, but like the country has put them forward to say, Academy Awards, this is Austria's submission for Best Foreign Film.
Oh.
And then from that pool they pick. But like as I was looking through these, so many of them had that side note. And Thale from 2012, which is interesting because it combines an exploration of both folklore, fantasy, and skepticism. Thale is a Norwegian movie that tells the story of Elvis and Leo, who run a crime scene cleanup business and are hired to handle this specific death where they uncover Thale, a female humanoid creature who has a cow's tail and is unable to speak as a human, and she's hidden in a basement. I'm not going to give too much more, but there's kind of a fun through line to Hulda here. So Nane Sarma, or Bibi Barfi, or Grandma Snow, is from Iranian folklore. Grandma Snow is associated with winter and survival, sometimes described as an old woman or spirit whose presence is felt in harsh weather, embodying both the danger of cold and the resilience needed to endure it. Native cultures across the globe developed rich winter folklore shaped by geography and survival, and, of course, this spiritual relationship to the land. For many tribes, winter was not an abstract season, but a living presence, marked by spirits, animal guides, and powerful forces. The different folklore, which varies not just tribe to tribe, but family and lineage to lineage, explain why winter came, how to endure it, and what behaviors ensured survival. The real difference here is that it also really emphasizes, in a lot of cases, a respect for nature. Winter figures in native folklore could be both protective and dangerous, teaching that cold and darkness were a necessary part of the natural cycle, not enemies. These traditions were passed orally through generations, embedding lessons of resilience, balance, and reverence. So let's talk about some of them. I found an article on oldfolklore.com, Ipavulik, a legend that is rooted in Inuit or indigenous folklore around the Arctic region. The Ipaluvik is known as a blizzard rider, but also a being that can control storms, even in some cases creating a path to flee them. So like, for instance, could bring upon a storm, but also kind of create a way for someone specifically to survive. According to the article, he confronts people who are wasteful or hunt without respect for animals. Through his actions, he teaches about the importance of community, thoughtfulness, and connection to the natural world. In other sources, I've also seen him defined as an evil sea god. So this is one of those things where sometimes researching folklore can be a little bit difficult or challenging because there's so many different versions of things. Inuit traditions and folklore vary greatly depending on region and, again, different family stories that are passed down. Isoyamstan, or the Cold Maker, is a snow god from Montana Blackfoot mythology. He is known as the bringer of frost, snow, and storms. He is visually described as a white man with white hair and clothes. He is also known to ride a white horse. The Blackfeet indigenous people live in the Great Plains, an area that spans from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and areas of Montana. Only Blackfeet elders are permitted to tell stories and tend to try and keep them internal and sacred to the tribe, so we are going to leave that one there. In Iroquois mythology, there is a great spirit who is responsible for the balance of nature. Snow also represents cleansing and renewal. It gives meaning to each season. To the Iroquois, snow is a gift from the Great Spirit. It's about embracing change and the flow of the seasons. Animals are often seen as messengers of the Great Spirit and play a role in the creation myth, which goes like this. A girl named Sky starts to dance. She represents the spirit of winter. As she dances, the snow starts to fall. There is also a character from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that centers around a being called Heikki Lunta, the snow god. But interestingly, Heikki Lunta is still celebrated in this region. There's even an annual fireworks display to him. And this is in large part because the character was created in the 1970s, inspired by Finnish folklore. David Ryuda originated the character, whose name translates to Hank Snow. At the time, a snowmobile race organized by the Range Snowmobile Club in Atlantic Mine was at risk due to insufficient snowfall. So the creator, who worked at a radio station, played a song on air called the Heikki Lunta Snow Dance Song. The lyrics called upon the Heikki Lunta, described as a Finnish snow god, to bring snow in time for the event. And according to local legend, the snow did come, but in overwhelming amounts. Many people believed that the song was responsible for the excessive snowfall, and after public complaints, Ryuda recorded a follow-up track called Heikki Lunta Go Away. Both songs were released on a 45 RPM record with one track on each side.
So I don't fuck around with public radio.
Exactly. It's the most powerful medium we have. Have you ever seen The Fog?
Yeah.
Case in point. Over time, the mythology, quote unquote, right, modern mythology, surrounding Heikki Lunta grew through children's books and theatrical performances. These expanded stories explore they kind of gave him background, right? His supposed origins in central Finland as the son of Elias and Saima Lunta, along with details about his siblings and his childhood sweetheart. The Wendigo is a supernatural being or malicious spirit from Algonquin folklore. Over time, the idea of the Wendigo has been widely incorporated into literature and other creative work, like Until Dawn, one of our favorite video games.
You'd say widely incorporated?
I mean, when you look at Native American creatures, yeah, he's probably the most well-known.
I'd say Bigfoot is more well-known.
Is that a Native American myth?
The Sasquatch?
Okay, so sure, but he's the second most well-known. I mean, he's much more like, he's around.
I think we are aware of him, but the Wendigo was really a slept-on cryptid, if you ask me.
I mean, I'll be totally honest. I wasn't aware of the Wendigo until I met you.
Well, there you go. And also, it's the depiction of the Wendigo is it's a very wide swath. Think of the movie Antlers. Mm-hmm. That's what I picture the Wendigo to be, this skeletal moose man.
Sure.
That's pretty cool. But that's not at all what a traditional Wendigo looks like. They're not even antlered.
The Wendigo is commonly portrayed as a hostile entity, sometimes shown with human-like features and the ability to possess people. It is believed to drive those it affects into unending hunger, a compulsion to consume human flesh, and kind of act out violently. In certain versions of the legend, the Wendigo appears as a towering humanoid with a frozen heart, announcing its presence through a terrible odor, or kind of bringing about this sudden cold. In contemporary psychiatry, the term Wendigo psychosis refers to a condition marked by symptoms such as an overwhelming urge to eat human flesh and an intense fear of becoming a cannibal. This condition is classified as a culture-bound syndrome. Within some First Nation communities, behaviors like extreme greed and environmental destruction are also interpreted as manifestations of Wendigo psychosis. We're going to talk about that more on a future episode in this series when we get to isolation. A related figure known as Wachuge appears in the traditions of the Athabascan people of the Northwest Pacific coast. Like the Wendigo, it is associated with cannibalism, but it is distinguished by its connection to ancestral knowledge and heightened awareness. And I just want to pause on both of these figures to say, if we didn't paint this background clear enough, the reason why there's a connection between the Wendigo and cannibalism is because it's believed to be sort of a response to extreme hunger that certain tribes maybe felt in very snowy, desolate winters that were driven towards cannibalism to survive, or in other words, like a punishment of greed of people who overindulged when the tribe was rationing food, things like that. It's very much linked to the survival and lack of food and the cruelty of winter. The Wendigo belongs to the traditional belief system of several Algonquin-speaking nations. While specific details differ among these cultures, they share the understanding of the Wendigo as a hostile, cannibalistic, supernatural entity. It is closely linked to the North and to the conditions of winter, extreme cold, and famine. Basil H. Johnston, An Ojibwe educator and scholar from Ontario offered the following description of the Wendigo. Quote, "The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion, the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton, recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody, unclean and suffering from a suppuration of the flesh. The Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption." End quote.
The Wendigo rocks.
Is the Wendigo your favorite cryptid?
Yeah, probably.
What's your top three?
Wendigo, Mothman, Loch Ness Monster.
Ooh, that's really good.
What are yours?
Mothman, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot.
Bigfoot? No. Mermaids.
Mermaids aren't cryptids. I thought
They're
about this.
absolutely cryptids.
Well, mermaids are above all else.
Why would a mermaid not be a cryptid?
You think a mermaid is a cryptid? I think it's deeper mythology than that.
Cryptid is too niche?
Yeah.
No.
Mermaids are mainstream.
I'd say Bigfoot is mainstream.
Yeah, but he's a cryptid. There's not a Disney movie about him.
There's no Disney movie about a Yeti?
No. In certain traditions, Wendigos are portrayed as enormous giants, far larger than human beings. This is a trait that's not commonly found in Algonquin legends. It's kind of, in different offshoots.
When do you find big Wendigos?
I've seen that in movies before.
When?
In Ojibwe, Eastern Cree, West Main Swampy Cree, and Innu traditions. According to these beliefs, each time a Wendigo consumed a person, it increased in size relative to the amount eaten, ensuring that it would never truly be satisfied. As a result, the Wendigo is depicted as both endlessly ravenous and unnaturally thin, perpetually starving despite constant consumption. Yeah, I think that's the part about Wendigos that are really interesting, that it's just the idea is that it's never satisfied.
Yeah, but it's rarely explained. Like, zombies will just eat forever because they're brain dead,
Mm-hmm.
With the Wendigo, they just explained it where the body will grow bigger than what the meal would sustain.
Yeah, exactly. The Wendigo is often interpreted as a physical manifestation of gluttony, greed, and excess. After killing and devouring one victim, they will seek out others without end. This interpretation is one of the most influential bridges between mythology and horror films when it comes to Wendigos. The 1999 movie Ravenous draws heavily from Wendigo lore, using cannibalism and starvation as metaphors for moral decay.
We did a deep dive into that movie.
We did. We do have a very early Wendigo episode, which I'm not advertising here as worthy to go back and listen to. More recently, Antlers explicitly uses Algonquin Wendigo traditions as inspiration, while The Last Winter connects the legend to environmental destruction and climate anxiety. In many stories, a Wendigo does not lose its human intelligence or ability to speak, and in some versions, it is capable of directly addressing, threatening, or mocking those it intends to kill. In certain traditions, people who are consumed by greed were believed to transform into Wendigos, making the story a cautionary lesson meant to promote moderation and communal responsibility. Other accounts suggest that Wendigos came into being when a person turned to cannibalism in order to survive. It is also believed that prolonged exposure to a Wendigo could cause a human to become one as well. Across so many different horror movies, snow is used as the perfect setting for these stories. Films trap characters in silence, strip away civilization, and force ancient fears back to the surface. In these moments, horror doesn't just borrow from mythology, it actually continues it. In a lot of cases, these legends and myths, right, like we don't know what they're being pulled from, but the filmmakers are actively looking at folklore to inspire the scripts. And so in this kind of roundabout way, they perpetuate these legends that might otherwise be lost. And we might not be able to name them when we watch it and say, oh, that's from Japan, or that's from this, or that's from that. But they're still retelling the stories in a modern way, and they will go on to inspire other horror movies and other types of media, right, kind of in turn.
No, I mean, it's just kind of a staple of the human condition. Like, no matter how much technology that we have, no matter how much our intelligence grows, you can still freeze to death. Like, unless you have your tools, you're going to die from exposure.
Right. The basic human fear of the basic humanity. Yeah. As science explained the mechanics of winter, it didn't make anything about winter's cruelty less horrific, Shallon's point. The gods faded, but the fear remained. Hunger became monstrosity. Isolation became madness. Snow stopped being ruled by divine figures and began manifesting as creatures, curses, and environments that strip people down to their most desperate instincts. Horror cinema didn't invent these fears, but it inherited them. Every frozen landscape in film, every starving figure, every snowbound nightmare is an echo of the same ancient stories, reminding us that winter has always been more than a season. It is a force that watches, tests, and waits. Continued next time on Lunatics Radio Hour.
Until then.
Talk to you soon. Bye. Looking for even more creepy content? Consider joining our Patreon for way more content just like this, including bonus episodes and very special deep dives. You can also join us on Discord if you want to stay involved in the conversation, and find our video content on YouTube, TikTok, or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you like to get your social updates. And of course, head to lunaticsproject.com where you'll find our very, very spooky merch and links to everything you need to know.
Are you upset by our egregious fabrication of facts? Tell us about it on Discord.